The pounding rain hammered against the windows like angry fists when the knock came at midnight. I nearly dropped my book, heart racing, as I peered through the peephole to see a soaked figure in a cowboy hat, his face shadowed but desperate. "Please, mister. My truck broke down a mile back, and this storm's not letting up. Just one night on your couch. I won't be any trouble," he said, voice rough with exhaustion. Little did I know that letting Roman in would force me to face the truth I'd hidden from everyone, including myself. I hesitated only a second before unlocking the door. The wind howled in behind him, carrying the scent of wet earth and leather. He stood there dripping on my hardwood floor, broad shoulders hunched under a faded denim jacket, water streaming from the brim of his hat. At 35, he looked every inch the cowboy the old-timers around Bozeman still talked about. Strong jaw, calloused hands, eyes the color of storm clouds. "Name's Roman," he offered, extending a hand that swallowed mine. "Theodore. Come on in before you flood the place." I grabbed a couple of towels from the hall closet while he shrugged off his boots, polite as anyone raised on ranch manners. The power flickered once, twice, then held. I poured us both coffee from the pot I'd kept warm, and we settled at the kitchen table because the living room couch suddenly felt too intimate. Roman wrapped his fingers around the mug like it was a lifeline. "Truck's older than I am," he said with a tired laugh. "Radiator blew right when the sky opened up. GPS sent me down some back road I didn't know existed." He told me he was headed north toward a seasonal job on a big spread outside Great Falls, but the storm had other plans. I listened, nodding, while something in my chest tightened. The same quiet ache I'd carried for years but never named out loud. We talked longer than either of us planned. He asked about the framed photographs on the walls, my freelance work capturing Montana's big sky and lonely roads. I admitted I'd left Chicago 3 years ago because the noise of the city had started to feel like judgment. "Family still thinks I'm out here chasing the perfect landscape shot," I said, surprised at how easily the half-truth slipped out. Roman's eyes met mine across the table, steady and kind. "Sometimes the best shots are the ones you don't see coming." The words hung there, heavier than they should have been. By the time the rain eased to a drizzle, the clock read 3 a.m. I offered him the guest room, but he insisted the couch was fine. I tossed him a blanket and tried not to notice how the damp shirt clung to the lines of his shoulders as he stretched out. Sleep didn't come easy. I lay in my own bed listening to the house settle around a stranger who somehow didn't feel like one. For the first time in years, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt full of possibility I was afraid to examine. When dawn finally crept through the curtains, pale gold and hopeful, I padded downstairs to find Roman already up, folding the blanket with military neatness. His hair was damp from a quick shower, and the morning light caught the faint scar along his left eyebrow. "Morning," he said softly. "Coffee's on. Figured the least I could do is return the favor." I poured a cup and leaned against the counter, watching him. Something in the quiet way he moved, careful, respectful, like he belonged here, cracked open a door inside me I'd nailed shut long ago. "Truck's still dead," he added after a moment, glancing out the window at the muddy yard. "I can call for a tow, but it'll be hours. Mind if I earn my keep? Saw your fence line sagging on the south pasture. I'm pretty handy with wire and posts." The offer hung between us, simple and loaded at the same time. One more day. One more night. I should have said no. Instead I heard myself answer, "Yeah, I'd appreciate the help." That single decision, spoken before the coffee had even cooled, set everything in motion. By noon the sun had burned off the last of the storm clouds, turning the ranch into a postcard of green and gold. Roman worked like a man who'd spent his life measuring worth in blisters and sweat. I handed him tools and held posts while he stretched new wire, and somewhere between the third staple and the fourth strand we started trading real stories. He told me about growing up on a failing spread in Wyoming, how his father's expectations had pressed down until breathing felt like betrayal. I shared how my brother still sent me Bible verses every Christmas like they were love letters, never knowing the real reason I'd left Chicago. The work felt good, honest, and physical in a way my camera never quite captured. Roman's laugh came easier as the day wore on, deep and warm, and each time our eyes met over the fence line something electric passed between us. I told myself it was gratitude, nothing more. But when he stripped off his shirt to wipe sweat from his face, revealing the lean muscle earned from years in the saddle, my pulse stuttered in a way no gratitude could explain. We broke for lunch on the porch, sandwiches I threw together while he washed up at the outdoor spigot. "You ever get lonely out here?" he asked suddenly, staring across the fields. The question landed like a stone in still water. I set my plate down. "Every damn day," I admitted. "But lonely feels safer than the alternative." Roman nodded like he understood every layer of that sentence. "Yeah, I tried the alternative once. Lost more than I thought I could afford to lose." He didn't elaborate, and I didn't push, but the shared silence felt like the first honest conversation I'd had in years. Afternoon bled into evening. We fixed the tractor's carburetor together, grease up to our elbows, laughing when the engine finally turned over. Dinner was simple, steaks on the grill, cold beer from the fridge. Roman insisted on doing the dishes while I dried. The domestic rhythm should have felt strange with a near stranger, but instead it felt right, like pieces of a puzzle I hadn't known were missing. When the last plate was put away, he turned to me, towel still in his hands. "I called the garage. They can't get the part till tomorrow afternoon at the earliest. If it's not too much trouble." He let the sentence trail off, eyes searching mine for permission I was already ready to give. "Stay," I said before my brain could catch up. "Another night won't hurt." The relief on his face was unmistakable. Later, sitting on the porch steps under a sky full of stars, he asked about my family again. I told him the truth this time, how coming out had never been an option back home, how I'd built a careful life of half-truths and careful distance. Roman listened without judgment, then shared his own quiet pain. A relationship years ago that ended when his partner's family found out and forced him to choose. "I chose wrong," he said softly. "Been running ever since." The words settled between us like dew on the grass. When we finally said goodnight, the air felt thicker, charged with everything we hadn't said. I lay awake again, staring at the ceiling, heart hammering with a realization that refused to stay buried any longer. I didn't just like having Roman around. I was falling for him, fast, terrifyingly, and completely. The garage called at 9 the next morning. Part wouldn't arrive until evening. Roman offered to leave anyway, hitch a ride into town, but I heard myself say, "Stay till it's fixed. I could use the help around here." He studied me for a long moment, then nodded. That decision stretched one night into 3, then 4 until the calendar started to blur. We fell into an easy rhythm. Mornings he worked the fence line or mucked the small barn I used more for storage than animals. Afternoons I took him on photo shoots across the backcountry, and he showed me how to read the land the way cowboys do, where the cattle trails cut deepest, which ridges caught the best light at dusk. Evenings we cooked together, talked about everything and nothing. Each conversation peeled back another layer of the armor I'd worn for so long. Then my brother called. Mark's voice crackled over the speakerphone while Roman was out splitting wood. "Mom's been asking when you're coming home for Dad's birthday. You know how he gets about family." The guilt hit like it always did. I made excuses about deadlines, but Mark pushed. "You're not still hiding out there because of that phase in college, are you?" The word phase landed like a slap. I ended the call quickly, hands shaking. When Roman came back in, sweat on his brow and an easy smile, he took one look at my face and set the axe down. "Bad news." I told him everything. The years of pretending, the fear that if I ever said the words out loud my family would disappear. Roman listened, then reached across the table and covered my hand with his. The touch was brief, grounding. "You don't owe them your silence forever, Theodore." No one had ever said my name like that, like it mattered. That night the air between us shifted again. We sat on the porch until the stars wheeled overhead, shoulders brushing, neither of us moving away. The misunderstanding came 2 days later. Mrs. Harlan from the next ranch over stopped by with fresh eggs and caught sight of Roman shirtless, laughing while I hosed mud off his boots. Her smile tightened. "Didn't know you had company, Theodore." The gossip mill in Bozeman was small and merciless. By evening my phone buzzed with a text from my cousin. "Heard you've got a cowboy living there. Everything okay?" The implication was clear. Roman saw the color drain from my face and asked what was wrong. When I showed him the message, he went quiet. "I can leave in the morning. Last thing I want is to make your life harder." The thought of him walking away felt like losing something I'd only just found. "Don't," I said, voice cracking. "Please don't." That was the first time either of us acknowledged that whatever this was, it had already grown beyond a simple favor. The part finally arrived, but neither of us mentioned the truck. Instead, Roman helped me shoot a series on the changing seasons, his quiet presence behind the lens making every frame feel alive in a way my solo work never had. We drove into Bozeman for supplies one afternoon, and the way people looked at us, some curious, some disapproving, made my stomach twist. Roman squeezed my shoulder in the truck cab on the way home. "Their opinions don't get to write your story." That night he told me about the man he'd lost. Not in the vague way he'd hinted before, but the full truth. A ranch hand named Eli, killed in a riding accident 3 years earlier. The grief in Roman's voice cracked something open inside me. I reached for him without thinking, and he let me pull him into a hug that lasted until the fire burned low. No words, just the steady beat of his heart against mine and the realization that love between men could look like this, quiet, steady, and devastatingly real. The crisis hit the following week. My mother called, voice trembling with worry after Mark had filled her in. "Honey, if you're in some kind of trouble, we can get you help." The coded language stung worse than outright rejection. I hung up shaking. Roman found me on the porch steps, head in my hands. He didn't offer platitudes. He simply sat beside me and said, "You don't have to do this alone anymore." But fear is a powerful thing. The next morning I woke to find Roman packing his duffel. "I got an offer up in Great Falls," he said quietly. "Starts next week. I think it's best if I go." The words hit like a physical blow. I argued, pleaded, but he shook his head. "I've already cost you too much. Your family, your peace. I won't be the reason you lose them." Watching his truck disappear down the gravel road felt like watching part of myself drive away. The house echoed with emptiness I hadn't felt since before he knocked on my door. 3 days later I stood in the same spot where we'd first met, rain starting again, and realized I'd spent my whole life letting fear make decisions for me. I grabbed my keys, jumped in the Jeep, and drove north without a plan except one. I wasn't letting him go without a fight. I found him at a rundown motel just outside Great Falls, the kind of place cowboys on the move know by heart. He opened the door looking as wrecked as I felt. "Theodore?" His voice broke on my name. I didn't wait for permission. I stepped inside and told him everything I'd been too scared to say before. That the night he showed up changed me. That loving him wasn't a phase or a mistake. That I was done hiding. Roman stood frozen for a long moment, then pulled me into his arms like he'd been waiting his whole life for those words. We talked until sunrise, mapping out the hard road ahead. He turned down the Great Falls job. I called my family and, for the first time, said the words out loud. "I'm gay, and I've fallen in love with a man who makes me want to be better." The silence on the other end lasted forever. My mother cried. My father hung up. But I didn't fall apart. Roman held my hand through every painful minute. The weeks that followed tested everything. My brother showed up unannounced, demanding explanations, accusing Roman of taking advantage. Neighbors whispered. Roman's old boss called with rumors that made him question whether any ranch would hire him again. Each blow hurt, but we faced them together. Long talks on the porch, quiet drives through the mountains. Nights where we simply sat in the same room and reminded each other we weren't alone. I watched Roman grow steadier, more certain of his worth. He watched me learn to stand tall without apology. The turning point came at my father's birthday. I drove home to Chicago with Roman beside me, both of us terrified but determined. The dinner table was tense until my mother asked Roman about his life on the range. Slowly, carefully, stories replaced silence. My father didn't hug us when we left, but he shook Roman's hand. It wasn't acceptance yet, but it was a crack in the wall I'd feared would never budge. Back in Montana, the ranch felt different. Lighter, like it finally belonged to both of us. Roman moved his things into the house without ceremony. Just a quiet, if you'll have me. I smiled and answered the only way I could. I already do. Months turned into seasons. We built something real, not perfect, but honest. Roman took over managing the small herd I'd started buying, and I landed a gallery show in Billings featuring the photos we'd taken together. The town's gossip quieted. Some folks even waved when we walked Main Street side by side. My family still struggled, sending cautious texts instead of Bible verses, but every small step forward felt like victory. There were still hard days. Roman's grief for Eli surfaced sometimes in the quiet hours, and I learned how to hold space for it without jealousy. My own doubts crept in when old friends from Chicago visited and asked if I was sure about this life. But each time we chose each other again, the foundation grew stronger. Love between two men in rural America wasn't the fairy tale people posted about. It was choosing to stay through the storms, fixing fences and mending hearts in equal measure. One crisp autumn evening we sat on the same porch where it all began. Roman's hand found mine, calluses rough and familiar. "Best night I ever had was the one I thought would be my worst," he said softly. I leaned against his shoulder, watching the sun paint the mountains gold. The boy who once hid in Chicago had become a man who could stand in the light, unafraid. Looking back, I still can't believe one knock at midnight rewrote everything. But it did. And I'd open that door 1,000 times over. True or false? Sometimes the biggest risks come from opening your door to a stranger, and the greatest love comes from refusing to let him walk away.